Hello everyone, I am back with another video and a long overdue, very much anticipated tour of the game room. This is going to be an extended, very thorough tour of everything around this room, areas that you've not seen on camera before. My biggest hope coming away from this video is that you have a much better understanding of the type of gamer I am, the types of games that I like and still collect today, and just a much better understanding of why I've curated the things I have over the course of my life. In many cases, I've pared down game collections. We'll get into that. In other cases, I'm still actively collecting for certain systems. But the vast majority of the stuff in this room has a story associated with it. It's very personal to me. It means a lot to me for a variety of different reasons. So I won't continue to give this long preamble. I want to make sure we get right into the tour, but I really hope you enjoy the video. Definitely leave me a comment below and let me know if there's different areas of the collection that you'd like to see individual videos of. Whether it's my PS5, PS4 game collection, whatever it might be, let me know in the comment section below. Enjoy the tour. All right, well, we're gonna get started here with kind of the primary and central shelf in the game room with that Lewis Family Game Room sign at the top. That's something that some friends of ours got for us when we first moved into the house, and I figured that this was going to be the game room. Kind of a nice home-warming gift. And we also, at the top of this shelf, have the Fangamer Banjo Collection from, of course, Banjo Kazooie. And the idea is, well, they'll kind of sit proudly atop this shelf for now. My wife and I would love to kind of hide them around the house and have our kids kind of run around and try and find them in a kind of Banjo Kazooie 3D collectathon fashion. So that should be fun down the line. But we're going to go through each of the individual game collections. I'll do my best to avoid the glare, of course. And the intention is that hopefully, like I was saying at the top of the video, you'll have a better idea of the type of gamer that I am, the types of games that I play, and certainly the types of games that I collect. But what you'll probably find most interesting is the PS1 and PS2 collection is very much a reflection of my childhood and the types of games that I played. And again, we'll kind of go individually here. And I'll do my best to kind of give some recommendations while not spending too much time on any one set of games. But you'll notice a lot of licensed games, particularly on the PS1 and PS2. And that's primarily because when I was renting games as a kid at Blockbuster Hollywood Video, I was wanting to seek out games based on movies that I was watching in the 90s. This is a perfect example of one. Casper, an actually halfway decent 3D platformer that my sister and I used to play all the time growing up, and one that's still my original copy. Very happy to still have that. But then over the years, I've also sought out games that I've always just kind of had an interest in playing, whether it's through YouTube channels or Twitch streams of friends of mine, 40 Winks being another example of that. Move Over Mario from Nintendo Official Magazine. I don't think that's too good of a 3D platformer, but one I still am excited to play. And then you have games like Bubsy 3D that notoriously are terrible, but I had to pick this one up for my good friend Pete Dorr. He's maybe the only person advocating for Bubsy 3D, and it's a game that I need to play at some point. But you'll also notice a lot of Disney platformers, many of which are games that, again, I rented as a kid, others that I've just played over the years that I've actually enjoyed quite a bit. And if you're going to pick up anything on the Disney PS1 side of things, definitely consider checking out Disney's Hercules, one of my favorite Disney movies of the 90s, and a really interesting 3D, or kind of like a 2.5D platformer. Think Klonoa, Kirby 64 with pre-rendered backgrounds, and you can kind of go into the foreground and background of levels while playing through the events of the film. A little bit pricier on the PS1, but definitely one worth checking out for sure. This one, I haven't gotten around to playing, but it's basically a Crash Bandicoot clone. So if you're into that and you like Lilo and Stitch, one worth checking out. This one is actually pretty decent, although I'd probably recommend getting the 64 version. Tarzan, I have kind of a beat up copy, but this is basically a Donkey Kong Country clone, where you collect the Tarzan letters as opposed to the Kong letters. So, pretty fun game. This one I've been meaning to get around to playing for quite some time, but I haven't yet. Another interesting 3D platformer that kind of bears resemblance to Banjo Kazooie. The characters have a really kind of goofy language that they use when talking, kind of almost gibberish-like in Banjo Kazooie, but almost like a precursor to New Super Lucky's Tale. Cute little fox. So the PS1, again, it can be difficult to collect for nowadays, depending on the genres that you're seeking out, but if you're like me and you're looking for a bunch of licensed platformers, you tend to be okay and can get games relatively affordably. This is a favorite of mine from my childhood, Miss Pac-Man Maze Madness. Fantastic soundtrack, and again, just a fun isometric 3D platformer. But we could spend all day kind of going through each of these individual games. Again, I'll try and keep it relatively brief, but the age-old question of if your game room is burning down, what games are you going to grab, or what things are you going to take? This is my original copy of Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage, one of my favorite games on the console, one of my favorite 3D platformers, and kind of largely inspired my love of the color purple at a very young age. Definitely would grab this and my PS1 Slim that you will see later in the tour. It was very nice to play the Reignited trilogy down more recently, for sure. Here you have a very derpy little Pikachu plush that I got at a garage sale for $0.25 when I was garage sailing with my grandma about 10 years ago. You can actually go back and look at some of my very early pickups videos, and you'll see a lot of the things in this game room featured in those videos. But this guy, we call him Derp Chew because he's got that like little squiggly derpy smile. But very cool nonetheless. My very modest PlayStation Vita collection. I don't have a ton of games on it. I've pared it down quite significantly over the years, but still happy with the collection that I do have. A really nice mix of games on the system. Of course, great representation of RPGs. If you're a fan of visual novels, it's a must-own system. I just wish that Sony had spent more time developing games for it on the first-party side, but still very thankful that we got things like Uncharted. You have platformers like Tearaway, a Hot Shots golf game, one of my favorites actually, and probably my most played game on the system, Hot Shots Golf World Invitational. I wish Clap Hands was still making games for PlayStation systems, but a lot of Monster Hunter clone games like Freedom Wars and the God Eater stuff, but again, fantastic little system. We'll see my PlayStation Vita console here later in the tour as well, but lovely little system. I just wish PlayStation supported it a little bit more. Further down, we have my PS2 collection. And again, if you're looking to see all those very expensive horror games and JRPGs that we all love, you're not going to see many of those. Because again, this is just, this is what I grew up on. These are the games I played, and my collection is certainly a reflection of that. Though I do wish I had gotten into JRPGs much earlier. If I have played stuff like Dragon Quest VIII, I think it really would have solidified my love of the genre at a much earlier age. But as we'll get to later when you see my Kingdom Hearts collection, that's kind of what really got me into JRPGs, but it was much later down the line, probably around the time that I'd started my YouTube channel when I got deeper into JRPGs. But again, more on that later. Another thing you need to know about me is that when I'm watching a particular film series or going through a TV show that I love, I'll often just get really all in on that IP. And so you'll see these themed collections, like this one here, of all of the James Bond games on the PS2. And we were spoiled during this era because if you thought GoldenEye on the 64 was the only good James Bond game, you are sadly mistaken. This is one of my absolute favorites, Everything or Nothing. Just these really memorable kind of single-player campaigns that were a ton of fun. But what cannot be overstated is how fun the multiplayer games, or multiplayer modes, were in some of these games. Nightfire in particular was such a blast. You could actually set up bots in this game, and the levels themselves were incredibly memorable. If you remember the ski lift level in Nightfire, and you could control those little like remote-controlled helicopters and tanks, you're a real one. If you played Nightfire, remember that. But Agent Under Fire was another pretty good one as well. These three in particular are probably my favorites. I have not got around to playing From Russia with Love yet with Sean Connery's likeness. GoldenEye Rogue Agent, pretty decent, like it more than others, but again, love those Bond games on the PS2. Would love to see some type of a revival. I think actually the IO Interactive, the Hitman developer, might be making a James Bond game, so looking forward to that at some point. Nice collection of Disney games, of course. And then we have one of my absolute favorites on the system that probably doesn't hold up well today, Enter the Matrix. I was just obsessed with that movie as a kid, the first one in particular. And then to walk into a store and see this kind of glossy cover, and then you end up playing as these nobody characters that you saw briefly, I think, in Matrix Reloaded. Ghost and Niobe, I think was her name. Very weird, but the bullet time mechanics were on full display. That was in an era when, Max Payne was, all the rage, and so bullet time, being able to slow down in real time in the game and kind of just dive and shoot bullets, dodge bullets was so cool. This is such an over-the-top game as well. This is when, again, in the era of Reloaded and Revolutions, that was just such a missed opportunity in my eyes. Reloaded's okay, but my gosh, what an interesting trilogy of movies this is. That game is nuts, especially that final boss, but fun nonetheless. Dark Cloud, probably one of the lone JRPGs in my collection. One of my absolute favorites, though. I did not play it until a couple years ago when Pete Dorr was doing like 8 to 9 hour speedruns of the game on Twitch. It's kind of when I got my introduction to this kind of roguelike dungeon crawler RPG. Phenomenal soundtrack, just a tremendous amount of fun to play, and I've been meaning to get around to the second game. Can you imagine if Level 5 revived Dark Cloud? How cool that would be. But you can play those, both 1 and 2, as part of the PS4 remasters, so that's pretty nice. We have my collection of Harry Potter games. These are always were great fun to play on the PS1 and PS2. Sorcerer's Stone and Chambers of Secrets in particular. Jeremy Soule composed the soundtracks to those earlier games, and before Hogwarts Legacy, we had these games, and my goodness, were they so much fun. Really brought the world of Hogwarts and Harry Potter to life in a 3D way. Pretty cool stuff. Another favorite of mine that I rented from Hollywood Video, Indiana Jones and the Emperor's Tomb. Uncharted, before there was Uncharted. Kind of a wannabe Tomb Raider game, but actually pretty fun, so. Again, not trying to spend too much time, but again, I think it's important to highlight and share stories of games that mean a lot to me when I can. The Medal of Honor games in particular, my goodness. Frontline and Rising Sun. Frontline, the single-player campaign, kind of storming the beaches of Normandy. That opening scene was phenomenal. And then Rising Sun, kind of similar to Nightfire, you could actually have bots in multiplayer, which was always a major highlight for me in first-person shooters as a kid. When it happened in Perfect Dark, it blew my mind, and then when I could do it in games like Nightfire and Rising Sun, even if I couldn't play with my friends, I could set up bots and still continue to play and have a good time. Rounding out the PS2 games, we have some Star Wars games, my Lord of the Rings collection. I've been meaning to do a renewed top 5, one of my actually most viewed videos back in the day. And I need to get around to doing a new top 5 at this point, maybe even a top 10, so stay tuned for that in a future video. War of the Monsters, one of my favorites. I remember seeing this, or playing it on a jam-packed demo disc with my buddy. And then we played the heck out of that, and then we rushed to Blockbuster to rent it. And just a really interesting kind of 3D brawler, but all of the kind of King Kong series of monsters and characters. A ton of fun to just run around those environments and just destroy everything, and again, just fight other people. Now we have my PS3 collection, and similar to PS2, you'll see a lot of themed license bundles, but one of my favorite things of this era was how many HD collections there were. You had the God of War saga, you had one for the Prince of Persia, Tomb Raider, Metal Gear Solid games. It was just such a nice way to not have, a ton of games on your shelf, but get everything kind of on one disc, if you will. This literally has, I think, God of War 1 through 3, and those two PSP remasters, I believe. And for me, this was a good way to kind of get rid of a lot of my earlier kind of PS2 games and just have one case to represent my love of a particular series. One of my favorite trilogies is a strong word, but my goodness, the Jak and Daxter games were so good. Precursor Legacy in particular. Jak 2 and 3, I think they kind of lost their identity in a little bit. I think everyone was trying to capitalize on the popularity of Grand Theft Auto at the time and just having an open world with like a wanted system. So Jak 2 and 3 are okay, but Jak and Daxter Precursor Legacy is timeless in my opinion, even if the camera issues are still pretty glaring nowadays. Further down, we have just about every Ratchet & Clank game made for the PS3. It's insane to me how many of these Ratchet & Clank games they made. And then speaking of those HD collections, you have the PS2 games remastered, all with their own unique sets of trophy lists, which is pretty cool. Wouldn't mind having one or all of the Platinums in that original trilogy. Going Commando was always my favorite, but excellent games. Further down the line, we have the Sly Collection. Sly 1 and 2 were fantastic. Wasn't a big fan of Sly Cooper 3, unfortunately. And then, my goodness, right here, we have my little Lord of the Rings collection of games on the PS3, but one I want to highlight is Conquest. This was developed by Pandemic Studios, which you might remember for making the Star Wars Battlefront games. And this was essentially a Battlefront clone with Lord of the Rings characters. They had a good and evil campaign. It was just a ton of fun, and actually a pretty good fun game to play online as well. Conquest might be making my list of top 10 Lord of the Rings games at some point for sure. Then we have my PS4 collection, which is undoubtedly my largest physical game collection, and my goodness, arguably Sony's best in terms of just their first-party offerings for this console generation. They were just really firing on all cylinders with Uncharted 4, Bloodborne, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us Part 2, kind of towards the tail end of the generation. Just so many great games. I also love that you can literally get like the entire Resident Evil series on one console. Anytime you can play just about any game from a series library on one particular console, I love when you can do that. In Resident Evil, you can kind of see here just about everything from the series represented on the PlayStation 4. And probably my biggest backlog of games as well. A lot of games in the PS4 I still need to get around to playing. Perhaps most notably the Yakuza games. I've started Yakuza 0, but I've not gotten around to finishing it. But again, just about every genre well represented, plenty of RPGs. I still need to get around to playing The Last Guardian, and gamer confession, I need to finish Shadow of the Colossus. So, my apologies there. I'm sure lots of people have already clicked out of the video, but that's okay. Next up, we have my PlayStation 5 collection. I know a lot of people aren't super big on the current gen in that there's just not a whole lot of games coming out. I don't really share that sentiment. I feel like this has actually been a pretty strong generation, even if games aren't coming out as frequently as they used to. I think the development cycle is just insane on some of these massive games like Horizon Forbidden West, Ghost of Tsushima, whatever Naughty Dog is working on next. But a fantastic console generation so far, especially when you have games like Astrobot. My friends, 3D platformers are still alive and well. You love to see it, especially when you have games like Balan Wonderworld, real hidden gem on the console. And now I don't tend to stack my games at all. Anything you see here are pretty much either more recent pickups or games that I'm now playing. But then you also have the remainder of my collection down below. Again, more miscellaneous games that I've picked up recently or I've been playing. And then my final few PS5 games. And then a lone PlayStation Portable PSP game back there. There's actually two games there, Birth by Sleep and Hot Shots Golf Open T. I sold my PSP and my game collection years ago, unfortunately, And it's probably a system that I wish I wouldn't have parted ways with, but I have. So it kind of just is what it is. Now right here in the center of this massive shelf, we have some of my favorite items. We have this little Diddy plush, naturally little Donkey Kong amiibo. But this little watercolor painting here is actually from a very good friend of mine who was kind of doing commissions a few years back. One of the main inspirations for starting a YouTube channel for myself, and that is TV and Lust. And I reached out to him many years ago and I just said, hey Craig, I'd love for you to do a watercolor painting for me. And the only instructions I gave him is if you could just capture something with Diddy Kong and Yoshi, two of my favorite video game characters. And then he painted this and sent it to me, and he signed it on the back, so maybe I can do a quick B-roll to kind of show you his signature and the date that he sent it to me, or the date that he painted it, and he titled it Diddy and Yoshi Snack Time, I believe. So if you're watching, Craig, thank you once again. This still sits proudly in the game room. Over here we have a little new Super Lucky plush and Elvis from Perfect Dark, and a Joanna Dark figure. I forget this line of figures that Xbox and PlayStation did a couple years ago, but pretty decent figures, well made. And then over here we have a little Yoshi plush. Yoshi is another one of my favorite characters. And then this little Van Gogh Starry Night picture of Mario Galaxy 2. Another gamer confession, Mario Galaxy is one of my favorite games of that console generation. I never played Mario Galaxy 2. I know. I have my work cut out for me, for sure, but I definitely need to get around to playing that sooner rather than later. Now, to the left of the main shelf, and again, my apologies for the glare, I'm doing my best here, we have this Yoshi's Story poster. And it is from a magazine called Endzone. Now, as far as I know, this is a German exclusive Nintendo magazine that came out in the 90s. And several years back when I was searching for posters for some of my favorite 64 games, I found this one and one you'll see here in a little bit for very inexpensive. And again, it was from this magazine. So if you read Endzone magazine growing up, please shed some light on that. I'd love to hear more about it. But just below the poster, we have some miscellaneous figures, including this first four figures, Spyro. I don't tend to splurge on figures very often, but I do tend to try and get at least one thing resembling some of my favorite series, whether it's a figure, a plushie, or a poster. And it was about time that I got a Spyro figure, which I got a couple years back. Then we have Vash the Stampede from Trigun, one of my favorite mangas growing up and animes. Of course, Solaire. And then we have a really special figure. This is Rapide from Tales of Vesperia. And a friend of mine actually got this as part of a gift exchange that we did, or were doing, annually around Christmas time. And it was my good friend Zach Archer, here on YouTube, is part of the Tarkaron YouTube channel that he does with my other good friend, ChronoLink9. And we played and reviewed this game about 10 years ago, so you can find a 3-hour podcast episode where my friends Zach and Alec reviewed Tales of Vesperia. And Zach's brother actually got each of us this Rapide figure to kind of commemorate our love for that game and to kind of push us to review the remaster, which we still need to get around to doing.
What is going on? No.
Don't say a word.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh! No way.
No.
Jose.
No. What is going on? No. What is happening right now? That's what I'm like. Just no. That's why I said I was scared to open it.
This is madness. This
is actually madness. Rapide
not be real.
Rapide. Wow. That's
what?
awesome.
What is going on?
Now down below we have some miscellaneous collector's editions, including one of my absolute favorites, Final Fantasy XIII-2. on PS3. You could probably still get that from the Square Enix store for like $30. It comes with the complete CD soundtrack collection, a nice little art book, and of course the game. And then some miscellaneous collector's editions as well, including this random Malcolm Reynolds figure. Shout out to all my Firefly fans, one of the absolute best. And also shout out to Disney Infinity. I remember going to a Walmart and finding these discounted for like $3 a piece. So, pretty neat little things to add to the collection. Here is my original Xbox collection. Absolutely love this console. To this day, I think one of the most affordable consoles to still collect for. And lots of obscure games too. I mean, you have stuff like Otogi, the Panzer Dragoon games, a favorite of mine more recently, Voodoo Vince, a fun little 3D platformer. And then, of course, the more notable games like KOTOR, the original Fable, the Halo series, Jade Empire. Lots of good games, but also a very affordable console to collect for as well. And to this day, I don't think there's a better game case, not so much Shrek 2, although check out Shrek. And maybe the most appropriate game to pull off to represent these green spines. I just still think some of the coolest cases to this day. And, yeah, just love the original Xbox. And probably the console that I have pared down most significantly over the years, my Xbox 360 collection, you can go back and watch some of my earlier videos back in the day, was very extensive, probably well over 100 games, and while I don't have the number offhand now, nowhere close to that. I really kind of just continued to keep the essentials, some of my favorites, like my original copy of Final Fantasy 13. Shout out to all my 13 fans. The Halo series. The Godfather is actually a pretty fun one. This is kind of like it follows the events of the first film, and it's kind of a GTA clone. A fantastic game if you haven't played it. And then one of my absolute favorites on the system is Lord of the Rings, Battle for Middle-earth 2. Not many games can pull off the RTS genre on console very well, just because that doesn't really translate to using a game controller. But Battle for Middle-earth 2 in particular really pulled it off. Just such a fantastic game. You can play through both a good and evil campaign, and I lost dozens, if not well over 100 hours to the skirmish mode as well, just going to Helm's Deep and trying to kind of recreate the events of the Two Towers film. Another favorite of mine that I got, originally played on the PS2, but a great launch title for the 360, Peter Jackson's King Kong, kind of a first-person shooter of sorts playing through the events of the film. Really fun game, and actually at the time, graphically looked very impressive, and I think it still holds up well today. So, and then down here, again, just some miscellaneous 360 games, including my very kind of bare bones Xbox One collection, but every once in a while, I will pick up a third-party release, not on PlayStation, but Xbox, just to make sure the console still works. Kidding, of course. I use my Series X quite a bit, and it's nice to definitely have the backwards compatibility that dating back to the original Xbox for certain games, which is, again, very convenient, very nice to have. Now, on the right side of that kind of center shelf, we have another End Zone magazine poster, this time for Banjo-Kazooie. And again, if I remember correctly, I got both of these posters for maybe 15, 20 bucks a piece. Nothing too terribly expensive. Very thin sheets of paper. I mean, they were tucked into the magazines themselves back in the day, but anyone that could highlight End Zone magazine, if you got it back in the day, I'd love to hear more about it. And then this is probably the most recent shelf that I've added to the game room. We had our Nintendo Switch collection in our room, but then when our daughter arrived, it was time to find a new home for the Switch games. And so got this shelving unit, and we have my Master Chief figure that I got for pre-ordering Halo Infinite. We got the Ezio Auditore from Assassin's Creed 2, one of my favorite games, and Nathan Drake from Uncharted 3. I think just about everyone has that figure in their game room. But something to note for those two figures in particular is I think they came in massive collector's editions back in the day, but now you can get them on eBay for like 20 to 30 bucks. And so from kind of what I've done over the years is I've parted ways with a lot of those massive boxes but have either kept or sought out the figures or collectibles that were in those collector's editions. So you save plenty of shelf space, but you still get the goodies inside that you wanted, especially figures, art books, plushies, things like that. So anyways, here is my wall of red. Nothing too terribly exciting about my Switch collection. I don't think you're going to find anything out of the ordinary or special. A lot of the games that you would expect, maybe a hidden gem here or there. But my goodness, what a recovery for Nintendo following the kind of disaster of the Wii U. Almost kind of the prototype Switch. A little random figure there from one of the Story of Seasons collector's editions for Switch, but also a backlog of games that I really need to chip away at. I've not played my Switch nearly enough, but still a fantastic console that I love. Some miscellaneous PS5, PS4 collector's editions, and then my very pared down Genesis collection. I'll try and get a screenshot so you can actually see the games that are down there, but primarily some Disney platformers. Every once in a while, I'll pop one of those games into the Retron 5 just to kind of get a little nostalgic retro fix. All right, continuing to move along here, we have some really cool posters and a painting that we'll kind of do a close-up here in a second. And the couch that I typically game on. But let's first take a look at these really interesting paintings that my wife and I got several years back. I think we ordered them like right out of Japan. There's a online store where you can get these, and the store is typically backlogged like 3 to 6 months out because there's just such demand for these things. But what you can see is that they are like really interesting takes on familiar IP, but done in this fascinating kind of Japanese style. So you have Luke Skywalker, Yoda, R2, and then kind of the semblance of Vader's mask, but done in a kind of samurai warrior style. And then over here, we have Avatar: The Last Airbender, kind of done in a similar fashion. So I'll make sure to post the link to the store, or at least pop it up here so you know where to get these if you want them. We have like 5 to 8 of these around our house. One that depicts Animal Crossing, Kingdom Hearts, Kiki's Delivery Service. There's so many different styles. Anything you can think of, they've probably done. And not too terribly expensive. Make great things to hang in the game room for sure. But then right here in the center, we have this unbelievable Kingdom Hearts painting that, as you can see in the bottom right corner, my brother-in-law actually did for me several years back for my birthday. And so while I wish I could have him commentate on how he went about doing this and the time it took, as you can see, it probably took him dozens, if not well over 100 hours. Riku and his Keyblade, Sora, Kairi. Down here to have each of the characters, Donald, Mickey, and Goofy. And then at the very top, you have the classic familiar saying, I've been having these weird thoughts lately. Like, is any of this for real or not? And you're probably not going to be able to really see this to scale, but that is a massive, massive painting hanging on the wall there. So very cool. Shout out to my brother-in-law for that. Then we also have this amazing blanket that, yes, you're not mistaken, that is Bubsy from Bubsy 3D. And Pete Dorr, actually many years ago, was drawing on one of his streams, a very kind of just chill, relaxing stream where he drew this using his tablet, and then he had the drawing printed on merchandise, including this massive, very comfortable and warm blanket. So I'll try and get kind of a still shot so you can actually see the entirety of the drawing and the blanket here as well, if I can include that in some B-roll. Now over here we have this kind of music corner, if you will. I think most people that love video games are fans of music, but I am a tremendous fan of all things video game soundtracks. And so this right here is my vinyl record soundtrack collection for games, with some miscellaneous film scores as well. You have Conker's Bad Fur Day, Journey, Klonoa Door to Phantom Isle. This is actually almost like a watercolor picture of Klonoa and Hupo. Very, very cool cover. This one is also kind of like my pride and joy because I am 8-bit printed this and a Banjo Kazooie soundtrack that we'll see here shortly. And they only printed like 3,000 copies. And they sold out, as you might imagine, almost instantaneously. Originally retailed for like 35, 40 bucks. And I ended up paying double retail on eBay as soon as they went out of stock. I'm not one to buy things from resellers, but in this instance, I had to because Perfect Dark and Banjo-Kazooie are two of my favorite games of all time. Absolutely adore the soundtracks to both. Of course, Grant Kirkhope composed the soundtrack to both of them, as you can see here. And I've been meaning to send this and the Banjo-Kazooie soundtrack out to Grant to have him sign those. But if you go on eBay, you will not find those, like, ever. They are very, very infrequently relisted, so I'm happy that I secured those for two of my favorite gaming soundtracks. And this is really, I guess, a shout out to everyone watching, anyone subscribed to the channel. If you want to see more of anything related to my game collection highlighted in any capacity in a future video, be sure to let me know, and I will do dedicated videos to kind of talking through different things in my game collection. Here in a few weeks, you're going to see my PlayStation 5 collection represented. But I also would love to do a dedicated video to my vinyl game collection, or vinyl soundtrack collection for gaming soundtracks. Music from Final Fantasy 13. There's just so many great records here. I'll just pop these in while I'm thumbing through gaming magazines or planning future YouTube video ideas, editing, whatever it might be. Short Hike, such a terrific soundtrack, such a fantastic indie game. One of my absolute favorites is from a game that not many people talk about, and that is The Pathless. Came out, I believe, in 2020 from Giant Squid, and why this is particularly special is because Austin Wintory of Journey fame signed it, as did Matt Nava, or Matt Nava, who is the founder of Giant Squid and the director of the game. And so what I've been wanting to do for a while, even though it would kind of take away from my ability to listen to the scores or the soundtracks, is potentially hang up a selection of these soundtracks on this wall here. I think it would just make this corner pop quite a bit more. But yeah, one of my absolute favorites. Great indie title. It's kind of like Breath of the Wild meets Journey. Great indie title. Definitely check it out. I think you can get it on just about all current generation consoles right now. But yeah, that's my gaming vinyl soundtrack collection. Again, a future video on that coming for sure. And then over here, we just have some miscellaneous CD soundtracks. This one in particular is pretty special because it is the Theater Rhythm Final Fantasy like 10 CD collection that I got when I was in Japan. Final Fantasy 13, we have Skyrim here. This is the one that I think a lot of people have, signed by Jeremy Soule. And then just a lot of miscellaneous gaming soundtracks. We have Final Fantasy 9, Dragon Quest 9 here, some Zelda ones, miscellaneous Ghibli soundtracks, a bootleg Pokemon Red and Green soundtrack, and then an unopened ukulele CD soundtrack there as well. So nothing too crazy, but again, I love my gaming music, and it's always nice to have that reflected in a physical representation of your love of a particular game, for sure. Just to the right of that music nook, we have another framed poster, and this is of Assassin's Creed Origins, my favorite Assassin's Creed game. set in ancient Egypt. If you've not played Origins, my goodness, so cool to see the origins of the Creed, Bayek and Aya. Fantastic protagonists. Good stuff. Some miscellaneous plushies here. I actually got these, speaking of my friends over on Tarkaron. They got me the Bomb and the Chef Kirby. I think both of these during a gift exchange over the past couple years. And then this, of course, is from Totoro. Just below that, we have my N64 cart-only collection. And my goodness, I cannot say enough good things about these little stickers on the spines. I think you've seen sticker spines for a lot of other games as well, but I think no other game collection looks as good with those types of stickers than the 64. Especially because you otherwise wouldn't really know what games are sitting here if you didn't have them on the carts. But what I particularly love them is because the sticker itself is almost a perfect representation of the sticker that's on the front of the cart itself. And I just love that. Really makes the collection pop in a way that doesn't seem too like egregious or like an eyesore. I think it just pops in such a cool way. Absolutely adore this console. I actually splurged a bit and ordered the analog 3D. So not that you really need to play your N64 games in 4K. Something you need to know about me is that I'm all about convenience when it comes to playing retro games. And if I don't have to emulate in the traditional sense, and I can plug my original carts into a console and plug it into my HD TV. Again, all about convenience, and since I recently had a daughter of my own, it's going to be so nice to be able to eventually introduce her to the system as well. Still need to get around to playing Rocket Robot on Wheels. This is actually one of Sucker Punch's very early games, a little 3D platformer. But yeah, Sucker Punch, who would eventually go on to develop things like Sly Cooper, Ghost of Tsushima, they made Rocket Robot on Wheels. A lot of other good games here, some interesting Disney games. Donald Duck Going Quackers is kind of a Crash Bandicoot type 3D platformer. And like I said earlier on the PS1, that Tarzan game is kind of a DK or Donkey Kong Country clone. But so many great games on this system, even if they don't always hold up nowadays given early 3D. But one that does is Bomberman 64, one of the best soundtracks on the console. So good, so good. Love the 64. You will see more of my box collection here in short order. Now I have miscellaneous amiibo scattered around the game room, but it was actually a good friend of mine that I met in college. As a wedding gift to me, he got the original Smash Brothers roster. Every single one of them unopened. He spent probably a tremendous amount of time driving around the state trying to find each of the amiibos. Probably really hard to find them back then. And as a wedding gift to me, he got, again, the original Smash Brothers roster. So, pretty cool. I have some other miscellaneous amiibo that you'll see later on. I also have this little Dragon Quest slime that I got in a gacha machine when I was in Japan. So if I can sneak that video in, I will as well.
Who'd you get?
I got a traditional little slime guy. Hold on. It's gonna take a second to open.
They really taped him. Oh,
I got a blue slime! Yes. Oh my gosh, literally the one I wanted. You can't go wrong with a little blue slime.
Oh, look how cute he is. I love it. Happy?
I'm happy.
More miscellaneous 64 carts. And then we have my very pared down DS collection. You'll see the Pokemon and Dragon Quest games a little bit later on, but still very happy with the games I still have for this system. Castlevania games, outside of Order of Ecclesia, Chrono Trigger, such an amazing way to experience that classic RPG. Shout out to my good friend Blinkoom. He actually gifted me Dragon Quest Heroes Rocket Slime a few years back when we first moved into our house, and still haven't gotten around to playing that, so I need to. Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings. I got this after finishing 12 proper a few years ago. Very much looking forward to playing this. It's kind of like a tactical grid-based RPG, and it's a sequel story that takes place a little bit after the events of the original game. So, love the Layton games. Excited to see what they do with, I think Layton's coming to Switch here, probably in the next year or two. But again, the Nintendo DS, fantastic system and very fun to collect for sure. And then right down here we have my Nintendo DS collection. This system actually came out right before I went to college. And so, as you might imagine, it was so much fun and so memorable to pack my 3DS, put it in my pocket or my backpack, run to my class, run to the dining halls, and then between classes, see that little green light flashing and recognizing that I had street pass people, and just picking up little puzzle pieces, putting all those puzzles together. I just feel like maybe more than any of Nintendo's other consoles, it was just such a great way to connect with other people. And I really do miss the era of having a handheld to kind of complement Nintendo's first-party offerings, or excuse me, console offerings. But yeah, my goodness, what an amazing little system this was. And while the 3D seemed gimmicky at the time, it's still pretty fun to turn on this system and play games with the 3D, especially games like Pilot Wings that have just great depth perception. Mario 3D Land was another favorite of mine, kind of cranking the 3D feature on. And at times it really actually helped you to see and find where some of those other collectibles were. But one other thing to note about my 3DS collection is that you'll see I have a number of games with the kind of world emblem there. Not something that bothers me at all. I know some collectors would be very particular about not having any of those types of games in their collection, and I completely understand why. But for me, it allows me and affords me, quite literally, the ability to play games that I probably wouldn't want to shell out the extra cash for. And the only difference is I have this emblem kind of tucked in on the corner of the case. Now, if there was some very glaring thing on the spine, like a greatest hits copy or a platinum hits case, maybe I'd be a bit more reluctant to pick up the World Edition. But if it affords me the opportunity to play games like Fire Emblem Awakening and Bravely Default much more affordably, I'm totally going to do that. But again, 3DS, what an amazing system, and how crazy is it that we can play a massive JRPG like Xenoblade Chronicles on 3DS. So cool. And just below my 3DS collection, I have my Nintendo Wii games. And maybe more than any other game console, I am so nostalgic for the Wii. People can point to it and say, hey, just a bunch of shovelware, cheap gimmicky, waggle control type games, but there's just something really profound about this era of Nintendo where it was just so global. Like, it wasn't just filling a specific niche need or type of genre. It was just as common to find the Wii in a gamer's home like myself as it was in a nursing home. And it just brought people together in a way that I don't know if any other game console ever has before, certainly from Nintendo, but like something like Wii Sports that just could be universally enjoyed by just about everyone was just so special. Not to mention that it was so unlike anything Nintendo had done before, because it wasn't just this game console, this avenue to put a disc in or a cartridge in and play games. Like, when you turned on your Wii, it was an experience. From the moment you hear that boot up sound to navigating the different Wii channels, going to the Wii Shop channel and looking forward to each Wednesday when they would announce or release new games, from the Super Nintendo to the freaking TurboGrafx to the Sega Genesis. There was just such a sense of discovery with this console, both with its first-party offerings, obscure games, or I should say remasters of games that I'd never played before, like Klonoa, to obscure games like Mushroom Men The Spore Wars, a fun little 3D platformer, what I consider a hidden gem here in Knight's Journey of Dreams. It's just, again, I have a tremendous amount of nostalgia for the Wii and just this era. It's just something that I don't know will ever be replicated for Nintendo, There was just so much love, care, and detail put into just every aspect of the system. Again, from all the different themes and music that played when you navigated to really any feature or application to, again, just the care and love that went into the eShop and all of the different things that you could buy there. So definitely an era of the past, and an era that I miss very deeply, but such a deep nostalgia for the Nintendo Wii, and I'll definitely need to kind of do some type of 20-year retrospective, because we are quickly approaching the 20-year anniversary of the Nintendo Wii here in 2006. But pretty cool copy here, the Japanese version of Okami. And my goodness, I feel like I could do an entire video of all the hype and excitement leading up to Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Going to that dojo page, seeing all the new character releases, new stages. Such an incredible time. Cannot be overstated. But very, very few GameCube games in my collection, unfortunately. Years ago, probably with my PSP, my biggest regret is getting rid of all of my GameCube games, because unfortunately, it is nearly impossible to collect for this system nowadays, especially first-party games. Everything is just so expensive, so maybe someday they'll be added as part of the Switch Online. That would be nice. Down here, we have my Adventures of Tintin comic book collection, one of my absolute favorites that I grew up reading. And then my massive Game Informer collection. I have plenty more kind of scattered throughout my house, but I don't know if anyone could beat the Game Informer covers. They just got you so excited for a particular game, but then just thumbing through, I just loved all the editors there at the time. And speaking of the Wii, the Conduit, it's just so easy to just thumb through these and get lost in just different eras. Loved reading this magazine. And still very thankful that I have a pretty significant collection of Game Informer magazines. I also went into Bookman's and did some shopping with Jason Heine many years back out in Arizona, and picked up a number of Nintendo Power magazines, just kind of some favorites of mine, or covers that kind of stood out to me. So shout out to Jason. Really cool meeting him and going out and shopping and picking up some miscellaneous Nintendo Power magazines. And then very few strategy guides for the Final Fantasy XIII series of games, some N64 guides as well, and then I'm sure a lot of people had this growing up, the official Pokemon Handbook. I actually had that poster hanging in my room as a kid for years, and I'm pretty sure I picked this up at the Scholastic Book Fair. So shout out to the book fair. I'm sure, my goodness, we're all, us 90s kids are nostalgic for that, for sure. Next, we have my kind of PC recording setup. I won't go too into the weeds of my equipment or anything like that, but I think it always is kind of fun just to hear what people are using. I'm actually using the Godox wireless microphone to record my audio for the tour, so hopefully that sounds okay. I won't know until post, but it's my first time using a wireless microphone, so again, hopefully it sounds okay for the purposes of the Game Room tour. My PlayStation Vita, cup of coffee, taking swigs of both water and coffee throughout the tour. Stay hydrated, friends. If you know me, if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you know I'm a big fan of Yooka-Laylee. Very much looking forward to the remaster of that original game. And speaking of video game music, huge fan of David Wise. Always have that David Wise relaxing music compilation playing while I'm working or doing things around the game room. It's one of my favorites. But this is also where I record all my videos. And so you have the Ozbot Tiny 2 USB camera there. And then I have a boom arm here with the Shure MV7 microphone. Again, nothing else too particularly special. I don't have some crazy gaming rig PC. Again, I won't go down there and show you necessarily, but I told my friend back in the day when he was helping me build my PC, I just want to be able to record videos and play old games on Steam. And so he quickly helped me assemble it. So no big deal, but certainly if you have more questions, you can always leave me a comment below and ask me anything specific that you might want to see or hear more about. Over here is one of my favorite posters in the game room, Jak and Daxter, The Precursor Legacy. We heard a lot about that earlier. I got this poster when I was in Pittsburgh with my wife at a game exchange, if you've heard of those. Some miscellaneous figures in Amiibo, little Klonoa and Hupo. And then this shelving unit here, you saw, if you've been following my channel for like 10 years or more, in a pickups video many, many years ago. It has this kind of glass encased piece in front of it. And you can see I still have a sticker from when I got it at a garage sale for not $4, I actually got it for $2. I had a DVD copy of Toy Story 2 and I was holding this shelf and the woman said, hey, if you can carry that shelf to your car, you can have it for $2. And so I got this shelving unit for $2, which is pretty dang nice and kind of houses some of my favorite gaming items. And here we have my Super Famicom collection of games that I got when I was in Japan, with some loose Super Famicom and Famicom games. We have some random boxed Game Boy Advance games, nothing too special in here. I've thought about potentially going for like a complete Disney game GBA collection, but definitely not a priority now. I'm really not focused on collecting for any particular console, really just kind of focusing on playing modern games, and then every once in a while I might, again, play something like Final Fantasy XII, the remaster, and get super excited and buy something like Revenant Wings on the DS, right? So every once in a while I'll kind of fill a gap in the collection, but not actively collecting for any one particular system, at least not nowadays. Down here, something very fascinating. So back in the day, I was a huge fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! And my uncle was also a big fan of Yu-Gi-Oh! And so when I went to college, I, at that point, had gotten rid of all of my cards. But then when I found a group on campus that was playing games on Friday nights, and there was like a Yu-Gi-Oh! Group and everything like that. And so I phoned up my uncle and I said, hey, because he used to resell cards way back in the day. And I said, hey, do you still happen to have any Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards in your basement? And he's like, Rusty, I have well over 1 million cards in my basement. He's like, what do you want? And I was like, well, I'd love if you have any of the original starter decks. And he's like, yeah. So a week later, I get a box from my uncle, and it had each of the original starter decks, Yugi, Joey, Pegasus, and Kaiba, all sealed, all first edition. So each of these are still sealed, first edition decks that came out, you know, at this point, 20 plus years ago. So very cool. He also sent me a box of like really interesting cards. He sent me the complete Exodia. It was very cool, especially if you're nostalgic for Yu-Gi-Oh! I about lost my freaking mind when I opened that box. We also have some pretty unique cards here. I mentioned earlier my good friends over on Tarkaron. Every year or so, Zach's brother ends up creating dozens of packs of cards based on things that they review or talk about on their YouTube channel. And since I've been a guest on their channel for many, many, many times, whether it's talking about Survivor, Disney live-action remakes, or other things, I was featured on some of these cards. And so a few years back, Zach had sent me the cards that I was featured on, which is very cool to kind of be part of or cemented in Tarkaron history, but also kind of pretend Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards as well. So very cool. And then right below here, we have some of my prized gaming possessions. Not so much these two pins here, though I think they are pretty neat from Fangamer. We have my boxed N64 collection. And what's particularly special about these games is that they are not my own. I mean, they are now, but these are actually my uncle's boxed collection. I have a video in my Garage Sale Chronicles videos that released probably about 8+ years ago, sharing each of these in much greater detail. But when I was in college and I was getting back into gaming, at least retro gaming, and I was recording videos for my YouTube channel pretty frequently, I called my uncle and I said, hey, you wouldn't happen to still have your N64 games, do you? I'd love to buy them off of you. And I was home for a break. My aunt called me back the following day and said, Rusty, I found everything in the basement. Come over to the house. It's all yours. And so I got to take home free of charge, their entire N64 collection with many complete in-box games that I grew up playing, and it's also at my uncle's house where I saw him playing and discovering Ocarina of Time for the first time, Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire, GoldenEye, among so many others. So, very special to have his collection now in my own, especially again, since this is where I discovered games like GoldenEye for the first time. I also, the only thing I've ever ordered from Limited Run is this collector's edition ukulele box. It comes with a replica N64 cartridge, not playable of course, and a copy of the game on Switch with a giant poster. So again, very cool portion of the game room, and very thankful that my uncle very graciously gifted his N64 collection to me, and it sits proudly in the game room now and gets quite a bit of playing time, for sure. Now back just across the way from the Kingdom Hearts painting and the couch that you saw earlier, we have my TV. And down here, I won't spend too terribly long on this side of the game room, but we have my Retron 5, where I can very conveniently play retro games on my big screen. We have my Nintendo Switch. This is the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate kind of collector's console. Really pretty neat how they actually kind of etched and drew the characters on the dock itself. And the perfect time to buy in on the Switch for me was to get my copy of Smash Bros. Ultimate and play games at that point like Let's Go Pokemon, Pikachu and Eevee. It was a great holiday to get the system for sure. Also have my Analog Pocket here. Love this little device. I also have the dock for it, so it's nice to be able to play, again, GB, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance games on that dock on my monitor. Some miscellaneous figures here. We have the Journey Wandering Traveler. One of my most watched videos is actually me playing the game for the first time on Twitch in 2020. So I'll leave a link maybe to that below, but such a memorable experience playing this game for the first time with a number of my friends kind of watching and kind of commentating, or just commenting, of course, in the comments section while I was playing the game, but one of my favorite games of all time, for sure. So it's nice to have a figure to kind of represent my love of that game. Down here we have a little Harry Potter Hogwarts Castle calendar piece. So I'm actually recording this on March 9th, so hopefully I can get this out here in a few weeks. This video, anyways. Then we have one of those classic controller holders, Banjo Kazooie, kind of neat. My N64 console, and then another gift from my friends over on Tarkaron is this Dharma mug. If you know what that's in reference to, you're a real one. It's a reference to my favorite show of all time, and that is Lost. To this day, I still think the best water cooler show of all time. I think the mysteries that they raised, the questions that surfaced when you were watching the show were unlike anything else at the time. And to this day still remains my favorite show. I actually kind of thought about for years spinning up a Lost dedicated podcast, but maybe I'll just do a video dedicated to why I love Lost and talking about all that here in a future video, if there would be interest. Down below we have my Polar White PS2. Love these PS2 Slim consoles, very slick, as opposed to the giant brick PS2s that originally released. And then we also have my PS1 Slim I kind of talked about earlier. This is my original PS1 where I played games like Spyro 2, Ripto's Rage for the first time. So this is very near and dear to me. And then down below, I know people have like an active hatred of the pop figures, and I'm not the biggest fan. I know they're not the most appealing figures appearance-wise, but you know what? Not everyone can afford play arts and first four figures, so it's nice to kind of be able to have a affordable, cheaper representation of something that you love, whether it's a movie, TV show, or video game. my original Xbox, which I actually got at a thrift store, complete in the box for about 50 bucks a couple years ago. So really neat to kind of have this massive console that gotten it for cheap. And then down here, we have this lovely little N64 cartridge holder that houses the rest of my cart-only games. Love this little thing. And again, love those N64 spine stickers. Now we get to the final area of the game room. And this is particularly interesting because this is, or used to be, a closet. So why break down your walls to expand your game room when you could just rip off the doors to a closet space? And that's exactly what I did here. And shout out to Orbalology, because it was after watching her videos and just seeing the shelving unit that she had that I thought was such a unique way, or the shelving unit just allowed for you to display things in such a way that really highlights pocketed areas of your collection. And in this particular instance, allows you to have like pocketed cubbies that highlight your favorite series, or just characters and things like that. So that's what I was able to do. It was very difficult to squeeze this shelving unit in. I had to actually assemble half of it after I had kind of moved it in. So a little bit challenging to do that, but enough preamble here. We can kind of go through each area of it. And up at the top here, we have the box sets for Dragon Ball and this little Goku figure. And then some various plushies, a Totoro, Sly, a Rot from Kena Bridge of Spirits, and this little Koopa Troopa, or Paratroopa, and this really interesting Super Nintendo backpack that I got at Walmart, of all places, a couple years back. Some random figures, Amiibo, and then that Shrek figure just hanging out right there. And then the Dragon Ball Z boxed manga set as well. Up at the top here, you'll just see a variety of console boxes, figure boxes. That Pokemon Sapphire box set that was exclusive to Europe, we'll be hearing more about that later. One of my favorite collector's editions for BioShock 2 that included the vinyl soundtrack, among some other things. There's that boxed Xbox I talked about earlier. But certainly if folks would want to see like unique things in my game collection that I would really highlight in particular videos, we can certainly do that as well. But let's kind of get into each of these isolated cubbies. Right here we have one dedicated to Yoshi, one of my favorite gaming characters. We have some boxed Super Famicom and Famicom games, Yoshi's Island, Mario World, and Yoshi's Cookie. And then some various Amiibo. This little Mario Kart figure I actually got in a crane game machine outside of a 7-Eleven in Japan, so kind of cool there. And then we have this Mario Sunshine little box diorama. I love these little things. Really cool way to highlight your love for a particular game. And then in each of these cubbies, I also have a vinyl record that in most cases is themed after the series that's showcased, but not always. So Pokey and Chill is just some lo-fi Pokemon tunes, and one of the video game soundtracks that probably gets played most often in our house for sure. Down below, we have my little Kirby shrine. Most of these little plushies I also got in crane games when I was in Japan. And then back there you have the Jak and Daxter Precursor Legacy record. My goodness, maybe I'll have to play some Sentinel Beach music to kind of commemorate that record, but pretty neat little assortment of figures for sure. Again, just about all of this I got in Japan when I was there back in 2023.
One Kirby to go with the second Kirby. That's so awesome. He's a pro.
And then down below, we have my Dragon Quest shrine. We have each of the original Dragon Quest 1 through 4 boxed Famicom games here. Not necessarily in order, but those are pretty cool. You have a pretty big Dragon Quest slime that my wife got for me in Japan when she was working for a Japanese manufacturing company. And then some miscellaneous Dragon Quest games. Monsters 1 and 2 on the Game Boy Color. The Japan versions or the Japanese versions. In the back there you have kind of the Monster Encyclopedia. A really neat book that we got when we were in Japan as well. And then back here, I kind of teased it earlier, but we have the Dragon Quest DS and 3DS games. I actually played a Dragon Quest game every year when I was in college, so 4 through 9, I played my freshman through senior year, and I still haven't gotten around to playing 7 or 8, so definitely something I need to do here soon. And then down here, we have some random art books, and then some books from Bitmap Books. I really just can't highlight these people enough. Fantastic books, very thick, well made, hardcover, and oftentimes they'll showcase either a particular game collection. So right here you have, obviously, the original Game Boy. Everything's in colored, well detailed, just write-ups of games. No better page to turn to than some Disney platformers, DuckTales and Aladdin. And then also screenshots of the game. So thumbing through these books is just a really cool way to kind of build out your wish list for a particular game console. Or they also have a book dedicated to JRPGs as well. So that's another one where it's just a lot of fun to kind of thumb through and kind of build out your wish list for a particular genre or game console. And then again, just some miscellaneous books there, manga. Over here we have the Tears of the Kingdom Collector's Edition, a box for a random Mac Mini that I sometimes edit on, and then we have a random Yoshi plush back there as well. These 3 crates I won't spend too much time in. It's just a bunch of miscellaneous wires, controllers, but I do tend to try and theme it out around particular things. So when I want to pull the PS2 off the shelf, I have all of my PS2 hookups. Same thing here. I think this is like just PS2, PS3. It's just makes it a lot easier than trying to go through boxes and boxes of wires. To keep everything organized in the little Ziploc baggies makes your life easier when you want to play a particular game console. In here we have my original carrying case for my Game Boy Color with Lugia and Ho-Ho on the cover. And what's particularly special about this is I have this piece of paper that I had written game codes on many years ago. You can see I have a little note written by my mom that says, "Hi, buddy." And what's kind of funny about that is I had also written that said, "Passwords, note, do not touch." Did not stop my mom from writing, "Hi, buddy." So one of my little prized possessions. Again, I don't know what codes are these games, or what game the codes were for, but that's neither here nor there. It's just kind of fun to see a piece of paper that I had written on, that my mom had written on, probably 20 plus years ago. So kind of neat. Now just above that, we have my cart-only Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance collections. And they are sitting in nail polish holders. You can order these on Amazon for like 20 to 30 bucks. And they make for great display pieces for your cart-only Game Boy games. They fit nice and snug, they display really well, and you can kind of see the front of your carts, and it just makes it really pretty easy and seamless to just like pull a game off of your shelf, pop it into your Game Boy Color, your analog pocket, whatever it might be, and occasionally I'll just spend an afternoon or an evening on the weekend just coming up here, throwing on some music or a podcast, and then just popping in Game Boy games and playing them for, 10, 20, 30 minutes. Always a lot of fun. Nothing too terribly memorable here or exciting. Again, a lot of licensed games. We do have the Donkey Kong Country games, Golden Sun 1 and 2, the Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings games, copy of Fire Red. Probably could pay for my daughter's tuition with this. And some miscellaneous platformers, Kingdom Hearts, some pretty decent stuff. But again, nothing too out of the ordinary here. Always fun to go to a convention, though, and thumb through boxes of cart-only Game Boy Color games. You just never know what you're going to find. And then my handheld collection, we have the Famicom Game Boy Micro, my original teal 3DS, a GBA SP with the kind of the more enhanced backlight, if you will, my first 3DS XL, which is the Mario and Luigi Dream Team, my wife's 3DS XL, which is the Pikachu edition, and I think my 3DS is downstairs. I have the Purple Galaxy XL, or the new 3DS XL, if you will. And then this is pretty cool. This is the Game Boy Light. It's not charged, but what was fascinating about this that came out, I think, in the mid-90s, and I did a review of it on my channel probably 12 years ago at this point, is it actually has a built-in backlight. So well before the SP was released, you had the Game Boy Light, and this was exclusively released in Japan, and this had a built-in backlight. So it made it much easier to play your games late at night without needing to have one of those worm lights or be sitting underneath a lamp. So pretty cool stuff. Again, that is my loose Game Boy Color collection. And then up at the top on the left, we have my Dragon Ball Z figure collection. All of these I got in Japan back in 2023 as well. And I don't think I spent more than $10 for any of these figures, many of which I got in the box. So really cool to grab those and very happy to have them. And then back there you have a Heroes and Villains record, and it has like character themes from Final Fantasy, from some notable heroes like Cloud and Lightning, and then villains like Kefka and whoever else, Sephiroth. So very cool. Obviously the lighting, the glare there is kind of odd, but pretty unique record. We have a part 2 of that record down here, and we have a little Final Fantasy shelf with box copies of 5, 6, and Tactics Advance on the GBA. Gonna name drop someone that you probably won't recognize unless you've been around the community for a very long time. Stormcloud Reigns. She actually sent me those boxed copies many, many years ago, and I still have them. Little plush of Vivi from Final Fantasy IX, and then these kind of Coca-Cola collector's items, these little figures from Final Fantasy IX, and then also Final Fantasy VII. So I got these on eBay not too terribly long ago for relatively cheap. Didn't break the bank on those. And then the premium edition for 7 Remake, and a watercolor of Cloud that my friends over on Tarkaron got me for a gift exchange again many years ago. So cool little Final Fantasy shelf for sure. And then just below, I mentioned this record earlier, a very like live action traditional Banjo Kazooie depiction. That is the vinyl record soundtrack that I got from I Am 8-Bit that I had to pay double the retail price on eBay, but again, so thrilled that I have it. And eventually, I will get it signed by Grant Kirkhope himself, I promise. And then a little Banjo plush ukulele. How wild is it that Banjo-Kazooie is in Smash? So cool. And then another one of those little diorama figures. And then down below, we have a kind of small little Zelda shrine. We have kind of the Heroes of Time record collection. Those are kind of like arranged medleys of famous Zelda songs. My uncle's copy of Ocarina of Time, that's so special to me because I just remember watching him play Ocarina of Time growing up and just being mesmerized by the game. The first time I had seen it, him not knowing where to go next, and me kind of just thumbing through the guidebook and trying to help him along and make his way through the game. The Link and Zelda amiibo, and then my copy of Skyward Sword on the Wii. One of my favorite Zelda games. I know it's not really typically looked at as one of the best in the series, but I love that game. Played it in college. Still one of my absolute favorites. And then last, but certainly not least, we have the shrines and collections of Pokemon and Kingdom Hearts here. More of my kind of prized gaming possessions, if you will. We'll kind of go through here and try and capture it all. But we'll start there with that Pokemon Sapphire box copy. That kind of goes back to what I shared earlier. A good friend of mine on YouTube, another name drop, Aerodynamish, if you're familiar with him. He, many years ago, when he was parting ways with a lot of his collection, he sent care packages to a lot of his friends on YouTube. And I have an unboxing called, like, I don't know, A Very Merry Aerodynamish Christmas or something like that. And I unboxed this massive box full of stuff from him. And when I pulled that out, I like lost my freaking mind. But that box not only included a copy of Sapphire, it also came with a themed Kyogre Sapphire GBA SP with the Pokemon kind of etched into the system. Oh, there goes Mudkip. So, incredible little console. And again, I believe was released exclusively in Europe.
This is just too much. This is a limited edition Game Boy Advance SP. Look at the hat I'm wearing. Just a hint at what's to come. Pokemon Sapphire version. I'm a huge, huge fan of this generation of Pokemon because this is when I got my Game Boy Advance SP. Never had a Game Boy Advance, the original one, and I had a Game Boy Color, a teal Game Boy Color with Pokemon Red back in the day. But I remember I actually got the lime green Game Boy Advance. I no longer have it, unfortunately, but I got the lime green Game Boy Advance with Donkey Kong Country, and then I got Pokemon Sapphire as well. But I don't even think this came stateside from what I know, because this is definitely PAL region on the back here, I can tell, assembled in Germany. So I'm not sure if this system specifically was released over here, but check this out. It comes with a really, really slick case, a wonderfully designed SP with Kyogre. I'm so horrible at pronouncing character names. System there, and then of course the game in the box there. Mike, this is seriously phenomenal.
A lot of random fun Pokemon stories, and that includes my copies of Silver and Gold on the Game Boy Color, and also Pokemon Pinball. Years ago, I went into a half-price books, and sitting on the shelf, not in a bulletproof case, just wide in the open, I saw those 3-box games, and they were going for $10 a piece. Yes, those 3 games, the best find I've ever had to this day in the wild, but at a half-price books, they were not locked away. The carts were literally still in the boxes, in perfect, minty, fresh condition, and I got all 3 of these for $30 total. I swear to you, if I was in that half-price books 5 minutes later than what I was, there's no way these copies would have still been there. So, talk about just right place, right time. So thankful to have found those, and again, probably could fund my next trip to Japan if I parted ways with these two games alone. Copy of Crystal that I did get in Japan for less than $10, just the difference between getting games in Japan versus here in the States. I have Japanese copies of Red, Green, and Blue. Those are complete in the box, and then these figures are pretty special. I got this at a thrift store, this old school Ash Ketchum, but this Pikachu here, that Pikachu, and that Derp Pikachu plush that you saw earlier in the video, I got at a garage sale when I was garage selling with my grandma about 10 years ago, and I got those for about 10 cents a piece. I think by the time I pulled everything together, the kid was like, "You can just give me a quarter for all of this," and I was like, "All right, I can certainly do that." Some random Pokemon amiibo. We have this really cool Pokeball kind of orb that glows, and you can kind of turn it on, and it highlights like different LED colors. But there's a Charmander in there. My brother-in-law got that for me a couple years back, which is pretty cool. And then my brother-in-law also got me this this Pokemon themed card of my dog, Scooby. So that's super cool, and it's in like one of those like almost like PSA graded cases, which is pretty neat. Some random anime seasons from the Kanto region up through basically Sapphire and Ruby, and then a lone copy of Pokemon Collection. Little Vaporeon there with another one of those little cool cubes. And then my DS Pokemon games and my 3DS Pokemon games. So again, some of my favorite things in the gaming room, especially just because, not because I paid an arm and a leg for them on eBay, but again, garage selling with my grandma, going into a half-price books and scoring those copies of Gold, Silver, and Pinball, and then my good friend here on YouTube, Aerodynamish, gifting me that that Sapphire version and that collector's set. So pretty cool stuff. And then over here you have my Kingdom Hearts stuff, including this display box for Birth by Sleep. I got that, I asked the manager at GameStop when I picked up my pre-ordered copy if I could take it home with me, and he reluctantly agreed, which was kind of nice. The worst thing they can say is no, right? So you might as well ask. My original copies of Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, Chain of Memories on GBA, the soundtrack collection, DS and 3DS games, or Amiibo. This little teacup, I believe my brother-in-law got this for me when he was in Japan. And what's particularly special about this and this little pin set, I only have 4 of these displayed that are basically the little stained glass windows that you see in the very beginning of the game when you're kind of selecting your attributes. We have Aqua, King Mickey, and Riku. He was in Japan for work alongside the release of Kingdom Hearts 3. And so Tokyo Skytree was like themed around Kingdom Hearts stuff. There was merch all over the place on sale because of the game's release. And so he picked up a ton of Kingdom Hearts stuff for me, which was really very kind of him. Kind of eternally grateful for that. Now this PlayArts figure here is fascinating because, let's see, the box is right up here. Years ago, there was a kind of giveaway on Twitter. And all you had to do was just retweet the tweet and I think comment with like maybe your email or something like, I can't remember what it was. And I was one of 5 people in the entire world that got one of these figures sent to them for free. And I remember getting an email from the person saying like, hey Rusty, you know, congrats, you won one of the Sora figures. I was like, yep, this is definitely not real. But I was happy. About 2 weeks after reluctantly giving them my address, they sent me this figure. So amazing stuff. And again, just so thankful to have some of these things in my collection that I didn't pay a tremendous amount of money for. Things were either gifted to me, I found in the wild, garage selling with my grandma, and scoring big at half-price books.
Alright everyone, that is a wrap on the tour. Like I said at the top of the video, if there's anything in the room that you want to see more of an extended view, pulling games off the shelf, kind of giving you an overview of any one game collection, let me know in the comment section below. But I want to thank you so much for your patience getting this video out, and I also want to thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you in my next one.